when you're in that feeling of grief, or if you are in feeling the sadness and all these yucky feelings, is to treat yourself like you had the flu.
Yeah.
So take things off your plate. Be kind to yourself. Do more self-care. Because just like everything else, it is temporary.
He's going to live with us for the rest of his life. His sister, what is that experience going to be like for her growing up? Because she's starting to notice and Sharon wants to interact with him. How do we explain that to her? What if for something happens to us? Is she... Welcome back to Over Dinner. I'm Jarrod.
And I'm Dr. Nikki. We're not experts. We're just two people doing the work together and apart.
Sharing real and unfiltered conversations about the human experience.
And this was a week of experience.
Of human experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, just a lot.
It was a lot.
I feel like it is a collective feeling that people are experiencing because everybody that I talked to this week had a week. I don't know if it's this time of year and the amount of things piling up, like experience-wise, but then also the pressure of a new year is coming. And I think a lot of people
holidays coming up.
Yeah, there's just like a lot. And, I saw something on Instagram yesterday that was saying, have a gentle holiday and instead of just like happy holidays, because the holidays aren't gentle to a lot of people, whether it's family stuff or grief that they're experiencing or just the pressure or financial issues.
Yeah.
Like it's a lot.
So in tonight's episode, we're doing a couples episode. We really want to talk about our therapy session that we had last night. Now, this was the first time we really got into the weeds about our experience with our son, Jake, who's autistic. We had talked about this in previous episodes, but some moments had come up for the last few weeks, different realizations for each of us, some grief we experience. And this was the first time we actually wanted to come to the session and actually talk about the dynamic between us, some feelings that had come up recently, how we navigate those as individuals and as couples. So in Jake's development, like with any kid, and I think she helped us realize that in the session, but we have these big moments of growth where we see him growing and learning new skills, right? And all those things. And then we have these moments which sometimes can be labeled regressions, or it's just new challenging behaviors arise or things that he was doing before. We start to see them go away, or he's not doing those skills anymore. And for us, this was a little bit different this time because usually in between a growth moment and these moments where we might plateau, it's usually longer, but we went from this moment of plateau or regression to growth, but then really quickly back to kind of a regression. Some moments happened at school, some interactions you had with some parents, right?
They were good. They were very positive.
They were good parents.
But they just brought up feelings. But something I wanted to mention, that what you were talking about is something that she normalized, is that all children are going to go through developmental changes as they're growing. The difference for Jake is that he goes through...
He's an asynchronous developer.
Right.
Right.
So what that means is that it's happening at different times for him. It's not in a typically developing, you hit this milestone, then this milestone, then this milestone.
For neurotypical children, it's a linear growth, right? Any linear growth development where you can that's what, when you go to the doctor and they ask your child if they're doing this, they're doing this, they're doing this, it's very linear.
Right.
For a non-typical child.
This one is where a person's cognitive, social, emotional, physical, or creative development occurs at different rates or at an uneven pattern.
Yeah, and they might jump to something that's farther down the development line, but totally miss some things, and that might come vastly later. So it's not seeing a linear progression.
It's like something also with Jake is that he has something called splinter skills, which means that he's very advanced in some areas where he needs other support in other areas of development. So to that point, when we have these moments of, we're going to just call them a regression, it's really challenging because it can feel very overwhelming. It feels very scary. He's not at a point right now where he's able to communicate what's happening for him or his feelings. Although I will say, he can say, I feel sad.
Yeah.
I feel mad. But it's not something that he's able to access very quickly or to say to us. And so it's a lot of guesswork, a lot of having to lean on his team members for us to understand him better. And then a lot of questioning, like, are we doing the right thing? Are we supporting him the best that we can? And so while these things are happening, I had a moment specifically at school that kind of kicked off my feelings of grief. I called it a grief valley this past time. And in that moment, I had dropped him off to go to pre-K. I was saying, "Bye, Jake. I love you so much." And there was a mom standing outside the classroom who had just dropped her child off and said, "Oh, that's Jake. My child loves Jake so much. He's so sweet and he just talks about him all the time. And my new friend Jake, I love Jake so much." And as much as that warms my heart and is just, I love hearing that his whole class loves him and he
Yeah.
has so many friends. At the same time, it's very painful because Jake is not coming home and talking to me about the kids in his classroom, right? And so I had to respond that, his aide tells me that they're such a great pair and they play really well together. And then I even outed Jake. I'm like, he's autistic. And she responded, very cool. I'm like, maybe I didn't need to say anything. She probably felt a little awkward,
Maybe it is cool.
but maybe it is cool, whatever. But she probably didn't know what to say. Anyways, the point being is that Carrie Carrillo, one of my favorite bloggers who is an autistic mom and she writes about autism, she calls these tiny paper cuts and that they're really painful, but they're really small. And so they build up over time. And over the week before we had this therapy session, we had multiple paper cuts and they included some skill regression from Jake, like potty training things that he wasn't having any accidents and all of a sudden he's having multiple in a day. Or something that Jake does is he's a Gestalt language processor. So scripting is a part of his language base. He can memorize songs and movies, and he uses those scripts to communicate in different experiences or, whatever. So to
Yeah,
that point.
for instance, tonight I was pretending to sleep in his room.
Mhm.
And so he starts singing the little bunny sleep because he's
Right.
relating to
Yes.
the experience, not saying daddy's sleeping. He sings a song
Right.
that talks about
Right.
sleeping.
Or says a script.
Or says a script.
Like Abby, she was on Love on the Spectrum. She talks about being a GLP and that when she was a kid, she went to a horrible, horrible traumatic camp. And even to this day, when she's feeling certain feelings that she had at that camp, she doesn't say I'm sad or anxious. She says I'm at camp.
Hmm.
And so GLPers use those phrases to help them
Regulate,
help and make sense of the world and for them to communicate. So, all that to being said, Jake was scripting a lot, and sometimes when he's scripting, we really can't break in. He's like really kind of in his own world.
Yeah.
So these all things happened. There was some issues between brother and sister and new behavior that had not been present before, which can be somewhat alarming, especially if you don't know what's going on. And then Jarrod was gone for 2 days. And we've shared on a previous episode, like really how challenging it is for me when Jarrod is gone. I think really for the whole family because it creates more balance. He claims that it's hard when I'm gone for him,
It
and
is.
he's shaking his head yes, but I don't think it maybe is the same for, I don't know. Maybe
Well, we also are different.
yeah.
You also are neurodiverse,
Yeah.
right? So it is more challenging, right? I logically step by step and do things, but it is hard for me as well because we do balance each other out. We balance the kids out, or each bring our own strengths to our relationship, to
And let's be real,
parenting.
it's 2-on-1.
Yeah,
So,
it's 2-on-1.
Jarrod was gone in the midst of this regression or plateau, whatever we want to call it. And Monday came around and Jake was just really dysregulated. And for Jake, what that looks like is scripting in his own world. It doesn't show up as really maladaptive behavior. It doesn't really show up as aggressive. He's not, none of those.
He's not communicating the same way. Like something unique that he really hadn't done is when you were taking him to school, he didn't want to go in. That's never happened.
Never happened.
So I think it was just like you said, these tiny little consistent paper cuts. And then also, I don't think you mentioned this yet. You went and toured a school for him possibly going to, and you're so excited that this is the right place for him. And then you come back and you're going through this experience with him, and then you question like, I don't even think he could go to that school. And the question you kept asking yourself is, am I not being real with the reality of our situation? Does Jake higher support needs than I'm actually thinking,
or wanting
believing,
to
or
believe.
wanting to
Yeah,
believe.
and like and the thing is like when we're in the growth or when things are really
Yeah.
regulated, I believe that,
Anything's possible,
right?
right?
But then when we hit these, I kind of start the spiral, and because I'm not able to have that conversation with him, I'm really relying on one myself, but then also these team members that we've built this incredible network of people with different modalities and disciplines that they practice with. And so I start to question, they keep saying he's doing so good or he's growing or he's so smart. And then I question, is their good my good?
Yeah.
Is their definition of smart my definition of smart? Is it pity? I start to like really go, are they being
Yeah.
truthful? Right. So Jarrod being gone is really challenging for me, especially when in situations like this, because at the end of every day, we have like a debrief of everything. And normally when you're traveling, we can have those conversations at night, but you being gone this time and where what you were doing, us having a debrief at the end of the day, it wasn't available. So I was holding on to a lot. And there's the emotional element, but the other piece for Jake is when he is in one of these, what do you want to call it? I don't want to call it a regression anymore. What do you want to call it? Any of these.
Well, what we talked about in therapy is this is actually growth for him. Is something's changing.
Yes, and actually, I did have a meeting with a neurodivergent coach on Tuesday. She literally said to me, when this happens, I need to ask myself, I need to tell myself, okay, well, he's changed and evolved. Something is gonna go haywire. So let's call it unplugged.
I like that.
Okay, so
It's a little unplugged.
he's a little unplugged. So
Maybe his batteries are drained.
yeah, so when he's unplugged like this, he also is very physically floppy.
Hmm.
Like it's like his legs don't work.
Yeah.
And so you have to carry him a lot, or he's just like laying around a lot. And so he's tall, he's like up almost to my shoulders at this point.
It's all good.
And he's probably 50 pounds now at this point. And so and then I have a 2-year-old who needs my attention. And so there's a physical demand that's there, which is exhausting. The mental demand of managing the two kids with two highly different needs developmentally to be a 2 and a 4.5 year olds and autistic and neurotypical. And then there's the emotional pain
Hmm.
that I'm not able to get support with when you're gone. And so it was like a perfect storm for a lot of things. I started to come out of it, like finding a lift Tuesday, but then Jarrod was still gone, so some things also happened. But my real shift happened on Wednesday, and then we went into therapy. We discussed a lot of this stuff. I think one of the things to note, though, that was really different about this time was your experience
Yeah.
and how you felt, saw, or feeling, and especially not being here. I mean, I was really interested in the fact that you leaned in to it for honestly, I felt like the first time.
Yeah. I think the first thing to say is that as he's gotten older and as he's getting older, his diagnosis with autism, it's becoming more prevalent. Like seeing the separation between a neurotypical 4.5-year-old and a typical 4.5-year-old when they're two, when they're younger, you really can't notice it that much because those kids are floppy and don't have a lot of language. But now you're starting to see it more. And also with our daughter, almost coming up on 2.5 years old, just the vast difference that we can have a full conversation with her. She can tell us things. She can
Like
tell us.
literally today, she
Yeah.
flipped off the couch. You got home and she told you.
Yeah.
Like she was like, Daddy, I fell.
Yeah.
And I was like,
And
well,
that's never something we've
no.
experienced with Jake. So seeing that difference. So I think for me, what started, which I have thought a little bit, but now it came to me a little more deeply. And as you've heard before, I'm one of those people based off, certain things in my life have pushed away some of the negative emotions I don't like to experience. So when these moments of grief or moments of doubt about the future, what this is going to look like, I typically push those away and put optimism like, it's going to be fine. He's young. He's got so much room to grow. He's growing. We're seeing all that. For some reason, this landed a little bit different. I think been trying to process, but I think this moment, just because it felt like a lot bigger unplug than before. And then seeing you where you were at, I allowed these things to sit with me and experience them. And this is really the first time I started to, what does the future look like? Is he going to need us forever? Right? Are we being naive to what his actual needs are and starting to question those things? And those were really new, not new, but they were new where I was allowing them to sit with me and went through that process. And that was really hard. And I really don't share this very often. I don't share this experience. And sometimes when it is really challenging and I notice myself getting more frustrated with him and I don't like that I get frustrated with him and angry, it's not his fault, but I find myself getting angry and more angry. Like our therapist asked us, what are you really angry about? I'm angry that, we're in this situation.
It's not anger.
I know. It it is anger, but as she said, there's multiple pieces of anger, which is grief, which is sadness, which is a
Pain.
bunch of these things, but it sometimes can present in your body.
Right, right, right.
It's presenting as anger. So that's why she ask a little bit deeper, but why are you angry? You're not angry at him, right? You're angry that this is the experience, right? And you start to question what's this all mean, right? What does this mean for us? You know, why was Jake coming to this world this way, right?
In our family.
Why is he in our family? Why are we his parents? And you start to think about all these
I
things, and
think,
then you worry,
but
and
I
you
think
worry.
I think it's interesting because both of us live in the other camp too of like really knowing why this is
Yeah,
in our family, right?
yeah. I
And
think
like,
it's these moments
no, it's right.
challenge
It's
that.
these
Yeah,
moments that you're like, fuck, should I not be? Like, am I being realistic?
yeah,
Right? Because I think, I mean, my whole new work is about this,
yeah,
right? And I'm going, if this didn't happen in my life, I wouldn't be doing all these
yeah.
things.
But I think these moments when it's really hard, you're like,
Yes.
fuck, this is so
This
hard.
is
And we have a typical daughter. It's hard. It's hard with her, but she can communicate. We can have
Yeah. We
conversation.
like to say that Jake's easy is Sydney's hard,
Yeah.
and Sydney's hard is Jake's
Yeah,
easy.
because he's the sweetest, happiest,
Yeah, she's
happiest kid in the world. But what was interesting is that I was away on a team retreat, and on these retreats, the first night we get together, we kind of opened up with some vulnerability and share and pose some questions. And it was just interesting. The question that we all went around and answered that night is, what's something difficult this year that you've been going through that you haven't shared with anybody? And I was going to say, other answers and stuff like that. But in that moment while I was there, this is what the experience was. And I hadn't really shared. Everyone knew on my team that Jake was autistic, but every time they asked, how are the kids? I was like, oh, I'm doing great. He's in school. He's growing. But I hadn't really shared openly and bonely some of these feelings I was having. And it felt like the right time. And I
so.
really hadn't shared it out loud
What'd you
before.
say?
The main themes of it was, you know, as you all know, Jake's autistic, and I just let them know that I really hadn't allowed that to sit with me yet, and what that meant for me of when having my first kid and having a child, that you have these expectations, especially a boy, and what that's going to look like, and that I was in grief over what I thought my life was going to look like, and then also how worried I actually was about his future and about our future and didn't know what that looks like. What was he going to go to school? Was he going to go to college? Was he going to be live independently and live a life that way? Was he going to have friends? Um, what does that look like for us? Is he going to need us for the rest of his life? Is he going to live with us for the rest of his life? His sister, what is that experience going to be like for her growing up? Because
Mhm.
she's starting to notice and she wants to interact with him. How do we explain that to her? What if for something happens to us? Is she solely responsible? And how does that impact her life? And I hadn't really allowed myself to feel those things. And I kind of was feeling them and then decided to express that and express those feelings of, I can't have a conversation with him. I get frustrated at him sometimes because I can't communicate or he can't communicate with me. I don't think like he's listening or hearing me, and that's really hard. And then, as I said, you start to see other 4.5-year-olds, and some of those people at this retreat have 4.5-year-olds, and they're talking to their kids and they're asking them questions and they want to see everybody. And you're like, will I ever have that? I don't know. And I just kind of shared that experience with everybody. And yeah, it felt really good to share that, but it also was hard because I was allowing those feelings to really sit with me. And you know me, I don't like those feelings,
I don't think anybody likes those feelings.
but I really don't like that. I
I
try to
know,
avoid the
but
thoughts.
I was when I sat with I met with a neurodivergent coach on Tuesday and she taught me about this mood meter and it's done by Yale. And the mood meter, it's a quadrant of four, and there's the red zone. Okay, so on the bottom it is unpleasant and pleasant. And then on the left-hand side, it's low energy, high energy. And in the top left quadrant is the red zone, which is high energy, unpleasant feelings like anger, for example. And then below that is low energy, unpleasant, which is sadness, grief, pain, all those types of things. And then in the right top corner is pleasant and high energy.
Green.
And so yellow is like thrilling and you're like, you have tons of energy and things like that. And then below that, the last quadrant on the right hand side is pleasant and low energy. Like that's where you want to live, is in the green zone. But the reason I'm saying this is because we talked about the blue zone and feeling these really shitty feelings, and that there really is no way out, except this is what she told me, which I thought was really poignant, is when you're in that feeling of grief, or if you are in feeling the sadness and all these yucky feelings, is to treat yourself like you had the flu.
Mm.
Now, if you don't treat yourself very nicely during the flu, like I'm that person, is to treat yourself like you would treat somebody else who
Your
had the
husband, your
flu.
kid.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So take things off your plate. Be kind to yourself. Do more self-care and allow yourself to sit in it while also taking care of yourself, because just like everything else, it is temporary. It will move. It will change again. And I recognize that today, after going through this really intense grief valley this past week, this is, I think, the first time that I really have witnessed the shift in emotion,
Mm.
the shift in the feelings, and they come and go. And so, too, what you're sharing is that it is not comfortable to feel these feelings. It really is awful at times, like how low you can go. Even the anger that you said can pop
Yeah.
up.
And what I said in that session too was when I'm in those low and those feelings come up, that's when those feelings of maybe anger or grief and maybe how I'm being towards him, and I don't like myself when I'm then. I know those feelings are important, but I just don't like the person I am.
But like, I'm just gonna keep cutting you off because you're not gonna be, you aren't. It's not real to be
I know that.
optimistic Jarrod all the time. And that person, I'm sorry to say, is not relatable. So
But that's what we talked about in
right.
therapy, right?
It's like, but like, so you cracking is actually a real sign of growth
For
and
sure.
strength.
And I totally know that.
I know, but
I'm just telling my experience. That's what I've experienced in the past. I don't like sometimes who I think I am in those
I
moments.
think it's so ironic that like you preach this and you don't like it.
I don't think, but you said nobody likes it.
I don't think anybody likes it. No one wants to feel grief. But at the same time, I think there are some people that are more comfortable sitting
Yes.
in it.
Yeah. Let's go back to the therapy session. I think the things that we addressed or needed to address in there was, and a lot of times I didn't allow myself to feel these feelings was because what if I felt those feelings and you felt those feelings and we're both in the valley? To me, that was, I need to be the strength and help you and pull you out because that's my tendency is to get Nikki to come out of that valley, come up here. It's optimism, there's hope and things out here. But that obviously wasn't helpful. And we've talked about that before.
I think sometimes it was helpful.
Yeah, sometimes it is for sure. She challenged me, but she also challenged you because she asked me, because I always say, I try to tell Nikki all the good things because you asked me, okay, like when you're in those moments, tell me some of the growth moments, tell me some of the wins, right? And I've told you, write the wins down each day, which you started doing. But then she asked me, does Nikki tell you the wins, right? To switch roles. Like, how often is Nikki telling the wins?
Which I
And then,
do.
yeah. And then how often, Jarrod, are you telling her the lows, right? She said, that's what Nikki goes to the low or those valleys a lot more times than you do. You're living on the wins and the optimism, but it's also how beneficial it would be to switch roles and share, right? And do that.
And I share every win with you every day. What do you not do?
I don't share those. Yeah.
You don't share.
But that's why we went into that session with her maybe a few weeks before we actually went to this session where I did and we really connected because we both were sharing that. And I think that was probably why this next moment came up for me because that was the first time I really allowed these myself to go there. And then it's probably going to come up more for me, right? Because you processed probably a lot more than I've processed.
Mm-hmm.
So she shared that with us, and I think she shared a lot. I think what was beneficial is like she also knows the development of children, and so things we were talking about, and then you even came to some awarenesses that some things that because Jake's our first child and he has this label of being autistic, that everything we look at the lens of something he does
Is
is
autism.
it's autism. Where what's great is you have some friends that you can share these things with who have neurotypical kids, and they're like, dude, that's not autistic. It's not autism, man. My kid's doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think the best thing that you did, which is what you always do in a theme from this when you're in these moments, is you went and took action, right? You sat in it, right? But then you didn't, and it spiraled a little bit, but then you're like, hey, I need to make some calls. I want to talk to his aide. I want to talk to his speech therapist. I want to talk to his OT and share what I'm feeling and let them give me perspective. So I love to hear, how that helped you and what you got from those calls. But it was the great part of taking action and not just allowing stuff, but going to speak to some people about it.
Yeah. I think that's kind of my MO majority of the time, not just about autism, but like when I'm feeling some uncertainty, I do go and ask more questions. But for this example specifically, because he is unable to tell me what's going on, I heavily rely on these people. Luckily, two of them have been in his life now for a long time, like a long time. Oh, I mean, I'll go on 2 years at
2 years,
this
yeah.
point. And the other one newer, but every day for
Yeah.
several months. I go to them for a multitude of reasons, one of them being education. So learning what happens to his body, mind, so forth. Like, for example, when I spoke with his OT, she told me that when autistic people get sick, their body, mind is going to manage that differently than a neurotypical person. And so he may have lingering effects that are different than somebody else, and it may manifest itself in like the potty issues or skill regression because his body is recalibrating. And so that I thought that was really like that's really helpful
Yeah.
information. She also reminded me about scripting and like the certain scripts that I had heard. She reminded me that he's probably trying to communicate something
Yeah.
to us. I'm having a lot of conversations with these people to become deeper educated so I can truly understand his lived experience, right? It is the best that I can from them. Secondly, is to find reassurance that what you brought up earlier, like, is what I'm seeing when he is plugged in, that's him,
That's him.
right? Getting reassurance. And just like our therapist said to us about this, this super, super normal, it's just going to display itself very differently because of his asynchronous development, right? So it's going to look differently. I really lean on them a lot. And I think that having a team that you trust is a key component to all of this.
Yeah. And I think really the last thing that she asked us, because we was trying to say, like, what do we do in these moments, right? What do we do? Is there anything we can do to like not allow these things? She's like, no, it's like this is going to be it. But then it's asking yourself questions, and it's asking yourself, why am I frustrated? Why am I angry? Why am I having doubts? And keep going and peeling it back because underneath there's little things underneath. But also you got to do it together. It can't be one of you trying to do it alone, right? Because then you're in your own head and you have your own stories. And I said to her, what's always been helpful for me is try to become the observer, right? Your dad always says, be of it, not in it. When you're in it, you feel consumed by it. It's all there is. The stories you're telling yourself are the truth. But when you can go on the outside and observe, okay, man, that thing showed up for me. Why did it show up for me? What am I really upset about? What am I really angry about? What am I really scared about? Right. And it might not lead you to a beautiful, like she said, sometimes it might lead you to a beautiful understanding. Sometimes it just, you got to just answer those questions
Sit with it.
and sit with it and work through it. It is helping and doing with each other. So that's also responsibility I need to do is not push to go to the optimistic side of things. And when you're feeling it or when I'm feeling it, I need to express with you. But also when you're expressing with me, I need to help you be the observer and be the observer with you and ask these questions. And I think that was really helpful because, and I said, I don't like this uncertainty. I don't have agency or control. I can't do anything about it. And that doesn't sit well with me. And she's like, yeah. It's just gonna be that way, Jared.
I mean, I had with the neurodivergent coach, she said exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
Like, this is just going to keep happening
yeah,
and you just have to sit with it, but it will pass.
yeah. And I think that's a big thing for just for, those of you that, we're talking about an experience through our son and all those things, but there's always going to be a lot of uncertainty about a lot of things in your life with your kids specifically with, recent events. There's always a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of times we build up stories of what the future is going to look like, and what's the fact? 80 was it 85, 90% of the time it's that never happens, but it's really not trying to go too far away from it. It's actually being present with it and understanding what's coming up for you and asking questions, because when you start to worry and all those things and start to build these stories, you're going away from the actual experience to the future state, right? And you need to be in the current state and ask those questions. I think that's just a great takeaway. Where I go to the optimistic future and it's going to be great, where you go to, oh my God, this is going to be really bad. It's going to be like this forever, right? It's like, no, she's like, just what's happening now. This is the reality is right now. Be here right now. Ask questions about right now, not about what the future is going to be. And I think that was a really helpful tip, which most of us know, but it's hard to do in practice. But it's stay in it. Whatever those feelings are, don't go away from them. Don't think about what's going to happen next or what's ahead. Don't think about, oh, it's going to be great and just pass it off. But this is what's real right now, and be here right now.
Yeah. I wish I could remember it in the moment.
Yeah. Maybe we need to post up signs all over our house.
Right, maybe.
Be here now.
And it's so crazy because, like, what I find happens is as he's going through this and I'm going to the worst case scenario, he always has like
Yeah, tell him what happened.
amazing
Tell him what
things.
happened.
Which one?
When he went into his room, that it was all this was happening. This was Tuesday night.
Oh,
After
yeah.
this is like the
Yeah, Jared
culmination
still
of
wasn't there.
everything.
Yeah, the accumulation of everything. I was like so deep in it,
Yeah,
and
Nikki had given up.
I had given up. And I went upstairs he likes to lay on his floor right now instead of his bed. So I went up there. I thought he was sleeping, and I was going to move him into his bed. He was still awake, and I bent down to like look at him and like brush his hair back. And he was like, "I love you. Good night."
It's like he knew he needed to hear
And the
that.
thing is that somebody listening to this, they're like, okay, Jake doesn't say that.
Unless we
Like,
say it first.
unless we say it first. And even if we say it first, he doesn't always say it back. So it's super, super rare to like have that. And it's like he must have known that I really needed to hear that. And it was a really special moment. But beyond that, he had a really stellar week at school. He had like that one moment
Yeah.
on that Monday morning, and then the rest of the week he like shined. He had a Thanksgiving
We
performance.
killed it.
He killed
We
it.
killed it.
We were blown away of how just well he did. His teachers are just remarking about his language, and he's really growing.
Mhm.
And so two things can exist, right? Like that he has all these skills and then also he is autistic.
Yeah.
But that's the other thing is that we are coming into a real awareness of is really owning that. I think we've been trying to live in our neurotypical bubble. I'm not neurotypical, but we've been trying to
Yeah.
live in this like way that actually doesn't fit
Us or him.
us or him. And taking ownership of that and moving into it, being like, no, we're an autism family, it actually gives you a lot more freedom. And in some ways, I'm assuming it will release some of the grief in a way that you're no longer, maybe not all the way, but you're no longer thinking about what you don't have.
We don't have, and other things that come up for us, what it looks like for other people, and are they feeling pity for us? Like this is just who we are, and this is who our family is. But I think embracing it, and like we find ourselves holding him back because of these experiences, these feelings that we have sometimes.
But it's us.
That's us. It's
It's
not him.
us. And that's the work that we're doing now and we want to do and continue and do in therapy is that like this is us. You know, I was thinking about this the other day. I was thinking about it because there's a little girl at school that Jake and her are two peas in a pod. Apparently they like hold hands all around the playground and they're hugging all the time and she's just like his biggest champion and is I guess right before the Thanksgiving performance. So gave like a thumbs up to his BCBA, like, I got him. I've got him. Like, she's so sweet. She's so thoughtful. And like and he actually, like, all of his classmates love him.
Yeah,
So I'm looking forward to this next chapter of us with Jake. I know that these valleys and bubbles of grief will come
yeah,
back
they'll keep coming
again.
back. But I think having the tools and knowing how we can support each other, how we can support ourselves is really, really important. And then,
For me, it's that it's just to remind myself that it's temporary and that he is still growing
yep,
at the same time.
yep. And then as that neurodiverse coach you spoke to, right? She said, you have to do the work on yourself.
Yeah.
Like that's what's most important, not about him.
Yeah, I was like asking her if I should like go do all the biomedical interventions, and
Yeah,
she's like,
the best thing
"Hey,"
you can
she
do.
goes, "Hey, everybody could probably benefit with red dye 40 out of their bloodstream, but that's not really going to do much if you're not regulated. So the most important thing that you do is learn how to manage your moods, take care of yourself, be in a really good position, accept him fully, but in order to do that, you have to be there
Yeah.
for yourself."
And I think it's just a great message, just in general for everybody,
Yeah.
is how do you take care of yourself? I think it's a really important message is not just if for having a neurodiverse children, I think is lead yourself first. You can't give to others what you haven't given to yourself. You haven't given yourself kindness and grace and care and love and all those things. It's really hard to give to others what you haven't experienced for yourself. So for life in general, I think take care of yourself the best that you can because that gives you the ability to care and love and give everything in the right energy you want to give to your friends, your family, your work, and all those things. So I think it's a good way to kind of wrap this episode up.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's such a good point. And obviously, the theme through most of our episodes and what we are really telling everybody is that it starts with you. And that is also how your partnership continues to stay strong and grow and be what you want it to be if you're taking care of yourself. So we appreciate you listening and being here. If you have questions, if you're wanting to connect with us, any comments about tonight's episode, we would love to hear them.
If you're new to the channel, please click the subscribe button. Please leave us a comment or review. It helps us just continue to spread the message of the human experience. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next week.
See ya.
Bye.